Fashion is a growing industry with the demand of high street clothing and high-end clothing always on the rise. Women buy roughly 3,000 items over the years. They roughly spend 13,000 on 271 pairs of shoes, 7,000 on 185 dresses, and 5,000 on 145 bags. In a woman's lifetime, the average that she spends on clothing is around 94,000. However, with men, they roughly spend around 34,000 in their lifetime. As we know, some high-end shops charge more for their items in comparison to other high street stores. But is it really worth it? Are you getting a true value from what you buy? Is fashion really worth the price? Both men and women spend a combined total of £63.6 billion per year on their clothing. There still is a distinctive difference between the two, as an adult male is said to spend over £16,000 over 3 to 5 years, whereas women spend £28,350 in that same time period. As well as clothing, an extra £1,786 is spent on fashion accessories. With the increase in clothing prices, this meant that consumers will be spending a lot more money on their clothing. We asked a number of people what their most expensive piece of clothing is in order to see where all this money goes.
The most expensive piece of clothing I own, I think is about £100. It was a coat I bought once and I still got it. And yeah, but I think that's like the most expensive I own.
Or I'd say like 60 quid, I think, maybe for a jacket.
Partially it was this jacket that it's not actually mine though. It's actually my father's. He bought it for around £200, but I've just got it, and to be honest, I don't even wear it. It's just one of those kind of memory passed on things.
Fashion has always been an industry that relied on its price in order to create a profit. Various stores have different approaches on this, as a number of them focus on affordable high street clothing, whilst others focus on more higher priced high-end clothing. A recent study interviewed 778 women and found that a shocking 74% said they think about shopping every minute. And after doing some research, we asked a number of people about their thoughts on fashion prices in particular, and if they thought clothing stores were overpriced. And if so, which ones?
Yeah, clothes are like really overpriced in some places, but like...
Is there anywhere specific you can think of?
Specifically, I can't really think like of anywhere specifically, but in a lot of like on Oxford Street and stuff, you just get these shops where everything's like really expensive, like even in like the shops I go into, like Pretty Green and stuff, they have like ridiculous like price clothes for like proper designer, like unique things that no one would wear, and so I think that's why people would pay that much, because they're so expensive and everyone would like want them, but I wouldn't bother. I wouldn't pay for like so ridiculously overpriced. Like, first of all, I don't have the money, and second of all, like, I just think it would be a waste of money.
Shoppers tend to get into a habit and rely on their preferred method of buying clothes, whether it be affordable unethical clothing or expensive clothing that has been made with greater care. For example, the average woman's favourite item costs under £50 but is also kept for 12 years, whereas in an average household, 30% of clothes are costing over £1,000 to purchase. We wanted to know why people spend the amount of money on clothing that they do. We asked people if they preferred quality, quantity or a mixture of both when it came to buying their clothes.
Oh yeah, definitely cheap clothing because I don't see. Many people think clothing is an expression of themselves, but I don't think it is because someone else has made it. So I don't know how it can be an expression of yourself really.
I think both, because some things like, I think it literally depends. It's like a mixture, because like some things like tops and maybe jeans that I would like, I'd maybe go a bit pricier because like I'd want like a good quality top, something like that, and but there's stuff like which I don't really care about, like socks for instance. Then I'll just get that literally in the quantity.
I'd say
Or a mixture.
I'm thinking it definitely depends on in what sense you're talking about. I mean, I could buy a dozen t-shirts for cheap, and they'll last me all year round. Or I could buy, like invest quite a bit of money into say quite a good coat, and then this coat would probably last me like years and years on end.
So I have loads, and then it's just easier. Like I wouldn't like pay like loads of money for socks or something, and so I'll just but for maybe like a top or a pair of jeans, then I would pay a bit extra, and so that'd be more about the quality, because like I don't want them to like say if you get a cheap pair, they might fall apart rather quickly. So I do want to get like a more expensive pair, and which lasts me longer.
So it depends. So say if I'm going to invest a lot of money in a t-shirt, I probably wouldn't. Like you get nowadays people buying t-shirts easily for 30, 40 quid. To me, that's just ridiculous. Like why would you do that when, you know, if you invest a bit more money, say about 150 to 100, you can get a decent quote that will probably last you a couple of years.
Yeah.
So I mean, I will buy an expensive t-shirt here and then, but
You'd rather go for the kind of cheap.
exactly, yeah,
Get
just
better use.
yeah, exactly. I just think it's silly.
Over recent years, affordable high street clothing stores have seen a significant rise in their profits. Places such as Primark earned £2.73 billion in 2010 alone. Whilst other stores might not have earned as much, this is still a very high price for a clothing store that heavily relies on word of mouth.
My favourite store, to be honest, right now, I mean, it kind of differs, but I go for cheap prices by fashion. And recently, everyone loves Primark for its cheapness, but I never really thought it gives you too much fashion in terms of what's trending on the market today. However, today, they really are catching up with basically what like bigger brands or like Top Man and that sort of stuff they're selling. So, personally, I think right now it'd be Primark simply because it's really cheap. If not, it'd be H&M because they're good for quality as well in terms of price.
Oh, that's a difficult one. I think like JD, because as you can tell, most of this probably came from JD or Sports Direct. Sports Direct, that's the one. Probably from Sports Direct because firstly it's very cheap. Which I don't buy my own clothing, but if I would, I'd go for what's the cheapest and is the most comfortable because I don't really prioritise sort of clothing among like other stuff. Like I prefer to spend a lot of money on I don't know like an iPhone rather than like buy a goods. I'd rather like buy one 400 or £500 like save up to get like a good bit of technology or some tickets to something or whatever rather than spend like get I don't know 10 pairs of trainers for £40, you know.
Another problem with fashion that is often overlooked is sweatshops. This is where an extremely high number of people's clothing is made. In Sri Lanka, workers were forced to work up to 130 hours per month in overtime, and anyone asking to leave would be verbally harassed. In the Philippines, 24% of workers said that they did not receive additional pay for their overtime. Their typical hours were from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. With a high rise in clothing that is made in sweatshops, we decided to research shoppers' opinions, asking whether they oppose the sweatshops and if they would still buy the clothing from the stores knowing what they did.
Sort of some shops do it, like of course Primark being the most famous example. I don't actually know how widespread of a problem it is actually, because I just sort of after I heard that I just assumed everyone does it, but I'm sure it's not the case. I'm sure it's probably not as big a number of stores as we think it is.
Do you think it's been kind of exaggerated?
I don't. I think I've exaggerated it in my own mind because I haven't researched into the topic. But I think, yeah, I definitely know some brands do it. I don't know much about it, but I know that they get paid very little money for doing a lot of hard work.
India and like, maybe like Asian countries, and they go into these like really, they're like really like kind of like poverted like areas where they have workshops with like younger people, like really young like children and stuff, like working on the sewing machines, like making these clothes, and you think that's like really bad, and they won't get paid much for it, and it's really sad and stuff, and like that's all you know about it. But I think maybe more people should be like aware of it, so maybe then maybe there could be a change, and like you could get like, so like the ethical side of things would change for the people in the workshops and people making the clothes, and then it'll be improved for them. And I don't know what that, but maybe people wouldn't support that because it would mean bumping up the prices of some clothes, and so it's like it's kind of like a seesaw kind of deal, and it's hard for, I'm guessing it would be like a challenging thing to do.
We asked a number of different people about their views on this subject matter.
I mean, I assume that there's some kind of exploitation because they're sold cheaply.
Yeah, I know Primark talk about equality and all this kind of, they've got all this stuff advertised, but I don't actually know in depth. And to be honest, I can imagine there's something not right with why Primark clothes are so cheap. I mean, that's probably why they've advertised it, if that makes sense, to make it seem as if they're kind of. I reckon there's some form of unequal kind of trade going on.
In fashion, there are a number of problems, one of which is that people often do whatever it takes to follow the trends. No matter what the costs are on themselves or others, some will do whatever is necessary in order to be fashionable. But we as consumers need to ask ourselves, with the knowledge of child labour in sweatshops, is the pricing within fashion really worth it? Are you getting the real value for your money? Is fashion really worth the price? You decide.
She's the face on the radio. She's the